Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. We're here today talking with a favorite of mine. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. She really is a powerhouse and is doing such good work in bringing together these differing things that really are so important in regulating our nervous system. So, we've talked a ton on the podcast about how important our adrenal health is, our cortisol managing, our nervous system is when it comes to our hormones, right? We always want to jump to the estrogen and the progesterone, but we really have to take care of our nervous system first and foremost in order to help regulate our sex hormones. So I love talking about this topic and I love the path that Lizzie takes with it. So my guest today is Lizzy Zima, who is a personal trainer, somatic practitioner, and creator of Empower Body, Mind, Soul, a self honoring movement and mindfulness modality that helps women release trauma, connect to their inner guidance, and embody their true strength and confidence. Her music driven classes combine tools for nervous system regulation and emotional resilience, such as breathwork and EFT, with functional strength training and intuitive pleasure based movement and self love to promote physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well being. At the heart of her work is the prayer that we may metabolize our past traumas, release shame and unworthiness, and rise up to embody our power and offer our greatest gifts and service to the rebalancing of our world. She offers classes, workshops, women's circles, and private sessions, both online and in Asheville, North Carolina. You can find her at empowerbodymindsoul.com. Welcome, Lizzie.
Thank you, Christine. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for
Yes.
inviting me.
100%. I love, the work that you do. I've had a chance to do some of your online classes and in-person classes too. And I really, enjoy I enjoy your approach and kind of the purpose of the work that you're doing because again, coming back to that nervous system regulation, which I definitely want to jump into more in depth here in a minute, but before we do that, tell us how you found yourself doing this kind of work.
Yeah, well, I grew up playing sports. I was on, all girls teams, and that was like um, my first experience of being like in all women's spaces where we were, together and we had that camaraderie and we all lifted each other up, and it was so empowering for me, and it was really a pathway to leadership. I was captain of my teams, and I led the stretching and I did the warm up mixes and everything. And then on the off seasons, I was training in the gym, like with my dad. So from an early age, like I have been strength training and kind of had that wisdom of like, this feels good. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel better when I do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of blessed to kind of have that early on. And
Yeah. I mean,
then
not many of us get that early,
I know
Yeah.
I'm pretty blessed.
Yeah.
And then and then in my 20s, started my spiritual journey and personal growth journey. And then I started doing a whole bunch of yoga, and I sort of renounced the gym. And yoga, provided me a lot of things that sports and the gym didn't. I really loved that mind body connection and the soulfulness. Um, but I didn't actually realize how much I was missing the music and the pump of the gym. And so it wasn't until I had a young child and I wanted the childcare that I
Mm,
got myself back to the gym. And it was like, oh, like this part of me, like that I had long lost, forgotten about, was like back. And it felt so
mm,
good because, it's like we think we got to do what's spiritual, and that's only one thing. But
right.
I it was like this homecoming and an embrace of my whole self again.
Mm,
And yeah, I just loved it. I love the music. I love the feeling of, the endorphin rush. Um, I just loved it. But at the same time, then I became a personal trainer and a group fitness instructor at that time. I was teaching a bunch of classes at the gym, but there was still like I was missing the soulfulness. So I'm
mhm,
like, well, it's like you got to either choose this or that, this side of the tracks. And isn't that our culture? It's like
mhm, mhm.
left or right, red or blue, yoga or the gym, And I'm like, I need to bring these two worlds together. And so that's how I started to create Empower, my class. And because I wanted to bring these things together. I needed to bring these things together because I needed a space that not only provided like an outlet for that pump, but to like dance wildly and like express my like feminine wild nature,
Mm-hmm.
and to connect in with my sensuality and my intuition, as well as my spirituality and as well as like my strength. So
Mm-hmm.
I really felt like all these things needed to come together. And yeah, and so that's kind of how it was born. And I was intuitively weaving in a lot of the somatic, healing techniques that I wouldn't have really called them that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just really called them self-presencing,
Mm-hmm.
techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So I was including that for a long time, but it really wasn't until the pandemic hit and then I got to see my nervous system go
Mm-hmm.
totally out of whack,
Mm-hmm.
that I really then started to study the nervous system, gain certification, and do my own somatic therapy, and then started to weave those pieces in at a much deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, like you were saying, it had felt so long like one path or another, and it was so interesting, right? Because if you think like the 80s and even the 90s, maybe, for women, it was like aerobics classes, like, and maybe you did a little strength training in that, but
yeah.
not that much. And then it kind of became the yoga thing that happened in the 2000s.
Yep.
And, we get so entrenched in this kind of one thing in this particular path, right? And we now know, I mean, some people that did yoga to this sort of extreme, it's actually hurtful to the body over the long term if you do it so much so intensely, right? Like we have women in their 40s and 50s getting hip replacements because they like over yogified, right?
Right.
And it's like all of these things are really important in a sense of balance of them. And so I love that that's what you're doing, is kind of bridging all of those and really looking at the different positive aspects that those can bring in, but then you're not overdoing sort of any one area at the same time too.
Yeah, or over identifying,
Right.
it's a
Right.
gym rat
Absolutely.
or a yogi or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
all of this.
Right, exactly. And we, we talked about a lot on the podcast, like how important, strength training is for, especially as we age, as we get into perimenopause and menopause, to really protect our bones over the long term, and that's really out there right now. But I also see a lot of women getting into overtraining too, when maybe their bodies aren't ready to go that hard that fast, right? And you are essentially dysregulating your nervous system. Same if you're doing like intense hit all the time,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's going into depleting your body rather than
Yeah.
supporting your body.
Right. More
And
cortisol instead of
right,
less.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then we know that that's not great for our sex hormones, and so I think that it's so important actually for women to understand that like what you're doing is sort of weaving these things together at the levels and the rates that they need to be at to not over push,
Yeah.
and to really like work together in that regulation. So let's actually
Yeah.
talk about maybe like for people that don't really understand what nervous system regulation means. Can you break
Mm.
that down for them?
Yeah, well, we want to have an adaptive nervous system. We want to be able to express the full range of our nervous system, but then come back
Hmm.
at any moment.
Hmm.
It's like it's normal to activate, get a cortisol rush. Like when we wake up in the morning, we have that increase of sympathetic activation, and when we work out, same, it's activation. We want to make sure that we're able to then down regulate and, get our parasympathetic on and down
Hmm.
regulate when we want to. And we want to make sure that we can kind of dance It's like it's never static, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like our healthy zone of resilience is it's just like a healthy dance around the center, being able to get activated and then being able to relax. So it's not just being zen and relax all the time. It's just our capacity to dance with what's arising and
Mm-hmm.
come back to our balance point
Mm-hmm.
at any moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we need tools for that because stress is like, as we know, at an all-time high. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
people are really experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. So we want to be able to just understand how our nervous system works, to be able to identify like what's happening, where we're at, and
Mm-hmm.
then what we can do to bring ourselves back into just like a healthy zone of being resilient and having access to all of our higher functions and all of our capacity. Because as we know, like when we're dysregulated, we're not our highest self. We don't
Yeah.
have access to our, you know, deeper intuition or higher
Mm-hmm.
wisdom. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's all offline, and all it is like fear and the threat and
Yeah.
the tiger chasing. It's like that's all we can see. So we want to be able to identify if we are in a sympathetic dysregulation, or if, you know, so that's like anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or we
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to identify if we're in a freeze mode, if we're shut down
Mm-hmm.
and we're frozen. We want to be able to identify if we're in a fawning response, if our social nervous system is activated and we're super concerned with what everybody else is doing and we need to
Mm-hmm.
come back to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was huge. I didn't really understand what was happening, especially during the pandemic with my nervous system. And then when I had like a vocabulary and understanding for what was going on, I could then, oh, I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
fawning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
I'm
Right.
scared, like, so let me bring my energy back to myself. Maybe I'm gonna do like a child's pose, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
or curl up in a little ball and just bring my energy, or cover my eyes, you know, bring my
Mm-hmm.
energy back to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about like understanding our nervous system so we can identify where we're at, and we can, you know, there's a lot of simple tools just to
Yeah.
help us come back into that healthy dance around the center.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up, these other responses that are technically kind of part of our sympathetic nervous system, but we don't think about a lot, right? We just think of that anxiety, but we don't think about the fawn response, and that is all within that same realm of, you know, sort of, I think of it as like output in a way, right? Our energy kind of leaving ourselves versus that
Yes.
parasympathetic is like bringing that energy back into ourselves. And I've been thinking about this a lot with some of my clients. I mean, I just did a case study of one of my clients with the women that work with me, the other practitioners, and, just going over everything about her. So much of it comes back to this nervous system dysregulation again and again, right? And you can't supplement your way out of it. You can't eat your way out of it. You can't even just, basic movement, you can't move your way out of it. It's like you have to have this almost, multiple times throughout the day, really being aware of what system you're in and like
Mm.
bringing yourself back in, right? And that's building that muscle, right? To get into the part of your body that we know is our, our rest and repair mode, but it's so much more than that. It really is, like you said, like our connection to our intuition. It is our, like, when we want to find a deeper well, and stability in a world that's really friggin' unstable, right?
Yeah.
It's like we have to keep building that muscle consistently throughout our day. And I've been thinking about that with myself too. It's like sometimes I get caught in that, like, oh, I want to drink caffeine, or I want to take some supplement that's going to like
Mm.
pump me up because I got to do this thing. Right. And just this morning, I had that moment where my body was like, no, you need to go the other way. You need to
Mm.
literally take 10
Listen.
minutes to do a meditation. That's going to ultimately give you more energy,
Yes.
right? Instead of this kind of, I don't want to call it fake energy, but this like pushing,
Yeah.
and it's like I had to catch myself because it's like I tell people all the time not to do this. And this is me
Yeah.
doing this. Look around. What
Yeah.
supplement can I take right now? You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
It's really about self-honoring,
Mm,
because we live in a world that just tells us like we're never enough, like what
yep.
we do is never enough, like
Yep.
bigger, better, faster, harder, like
Hmm.
push through.
Hmm.
And it's like you said, like adrenal fatigue and
Hmm.
all manner of
Hmm.
autoimmune
Yep.
disorders
Yep. Yep.
unfolding because of it. So I think it's our biggest work at this time in reclaiming our enoughness,
Yeah.
is to just like be tuning in with how we feel, which is just like a big step because
Yeah.
we're so disassociated from how we're feeling and so far at everyone else's experience, especially as women taking care of others, to identify how we're feeling and then what we're actually needing and
Hmm.
then to give us that. I mean, that's like our biggest flex. It sounds like so simple. Like, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
What am I needing? And then actually
And
giving
then
that
do
to
it.
ourselves. Yeah. But it's like this is how we take our power back. We
Yeah.
live in a masculine society that's
Hmm.
just, push
Yep.
push forward. This is how we reclaim our feminine power by
Hmm.
actually honoring the wisdom of our body, which is
Hmm.
like an extension of the earth.
Hmm.
It's a way to reclaim on all levels this feminine power, this feminine wisdom. And it's like
Hmm.
it's got to start somewhere. It's like it's
Yep.
got to start with us, and we got to then teach other people, yeah, we're going to take a break when we're bleeding,
Right.
like we're going to rest when we're tired, and
Yep.
like show our kids and everyone else, our employees and everyone, like
Yeah.
this is how we're going to do it. We're going to pave a new way of self-honoring. And I really do think that um the wound of unworthiness,
Hmm. Hmm.
not enough, I feel like
Hmm.
that's like the seed of all of our neuroses and dysfunction. And that actually when we can focus there and nourish that seed, which is ourselves,
Hmm.
um, we heal. Like it ripples out to heal like all of these other dysfunctions. It's
Hmm.
like I feel like instead of band-aiding, all the things, it's like we can really go in to heal that wound of unworthiness and really start to honor ourselves, and then we see all these things start to heal from the inside
Mhm.
out.
Mhm. And I was thinking as you were talking about that, I mean, this is when people want to know how to, regulate their hormones, like that's it, right? I mean, yes, there's lots of other supports that we can do, but what you're talking about is what's going to heal your hormones, right?
Mm,
It really is. It's like syncing up with your body. It's giving it rest, all of those things. That's going to do much more than anything else that you're going to attempt to do. But also, I was thinking, like, and you're an entrepreneur too. And, it's so easy for us to get caught up in that, like, okay, we have to like keep doing and going hard
yeah.
and like making all the things happen all the time. Even if
Woo!
we know not to get into that, it's still hard not to fall into it because of, well, everything that just goes with being an entrepreneur, right? Like the
Yeah.
expectations, the ebbs and flows of it that can be hard.
Yeah.
And yet I think what you're talking about is so important as women entrepreneurs, creating this new pathway and living what we are speaking to
Yeah.
our clients and the people that we help. It's like we got to do that
It's a
too.
practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a huge practice, and ultimately it is what serves you the best. It's what makes it sustainable because it
Mm,
hasn't been sustainable, right? And so many women's bodies show that it's not sustainable and we keep just trying to push past it. And
yes.
this is the work, like you said. It's the big
It
work.
sounds so like unsexy, but
Yeah.
like practicing like enoughness,
Yep.
like
Yep.
completing one, portion of our day or one client or this podcast, and just
Hmm.
like that was good
That was
enough,
yeah. And
like
like it was fabulous. I mean, it's
yeah.
so hard because I get to the end of my day all the time and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done. I didn't get this done." Instead of like, look at all the things, the amazing things that I did. And the
Yeah, the brain is
ways.
designed,
Yeah.
it's attempting to help us keep us safe, but it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna always zero in on what's not enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have to get like five compliments,
Mm-hmm.
to every one criticism to balance that out,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really is a practice and a retraining of our brain to celebrate our success and to
Yeah.
honor ourselves.
Yep. Every single
Mm.
day.
Every single day. And that's why my biggest thing is like daily practice. Cause like
Yeah.
some of these, like, can have these big monumental moments of like breakthrough and deep somatic healing
Mm-hmm.
for sure. And I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
But we need a daily practice. We're
Mm-hmm.
rewiring like eons of, dishonoring of the feminine and our
Mm-hmm.
bodies. And
Mm-hmm.
our moms didn't necessarily have this wisdom, to
Mm-hmm.
download to us. So it's like we are really rewiring our entire being, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes a consistent practice.
Yeah.
So I'm really huge about like showing up every day
Mm-hmm.
for our practices and
Mm-hmm.
for our renewed commitment to honor ourselves and to love ourselves through these wild initiations of being a human being on this planet at this time.
Absolutely. So share with us some of your favorite practices.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of meditation. I know that's an advanced practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I love having a place that I make beautiful, like an altar or just a beautiful place. Doesn't have to be called that,
Mm-hmm.
but a place where I, put flowers and some of my favorite images of myself and some of the affirmations that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love creating a ritual where I go to this place. I get my coffee actually, and I go to my place and I sit with myself. I meditate and some days, meditation doesn't just happen like that. I've
Mm-hmm.
got anxiety,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so in those cases, I might go to tapping, emotional freedom technique tapping,
Mm-hmm.
or shaking and dancing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
meeting myself in the energy that's showing up before then trying to actually, get still.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's sort of like how I usually start the day, and I really, really recommend a morning practice because how we start the tone for the day, in my experience, makes a huge difference for the
Mm-hmm.
amount of spaciousness
Mm-hmm.
that I feel, my capacity to manage things not going my way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which happens
yeah,
most days for most of us,
right.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like that, and breath work is another tool that I'll bring in, especially if I'm feeling anxious, which some days, waking up anxious happens.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It's
Um,
like name that and that's okay. I think, yeah, so
yeah.
many people try and run
Yeah.
away from it,
Uh,
I get it. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that's kind of like one of the cornerstones of my entire work is like meeting ourselves where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always where we start,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love EFT because that's the whole thing with EFT. It's like even though I'm feeling this way, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. It's like
Mm-hmm.
acceptance and love is the secret sauce. We think it's gonna inhibit us from getting to where we want to go,
Mm-hmm.
keeping us stagnant, but no, it's like that shame is the thing that paralyzes us. The
Mm-hmm.
acceptance is what moves us forward. We
Mm-hmm.
can't heal without it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
that piece is huge. And I'm a huge, 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 huge fan of daily grounding, like getting my bare feet out on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
sunlight in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's good to go first thing in the morning, but really I like to go in the warmest part of the day and just like
Mm-hmm.
gift myself. It's like
Mm-hmm.
like a break. And I find that supporting with energy levels and releasing anxiety,
Yeah.
that grounding maybe is my one of my most favorite tools.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yes.
it's cool because there's actual research that
Oh,
shows that it literally works, It's not
it
just this like
literally,
woo-woo thing, right? Like
yeah.
and it makes sense because, I talk about this all the time. Like our infradial rhythm, which is, our cycle, is our circadian rhythm, really. Like
Yes.
circadian rhythm is the daily thing that makes up our whole cycle, so that's where you want to begin. And absolutely, we're not getting enough sun in general. So whenever you can get out and get in the sun is so wonderful, but certainly connecting with the earth is a huge part of that. It's a huge part of like the microbes that are in our gut. I mean, all of these ways that, of course, we are born of the earth, we're born of nature. So, of course, our health is going to be dependent on our ability to be out there connecting with it. It's a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, like obviously we've been disconnected. People drive into their, garages
Hmm.
and wear the shoes, and
Hmm.
I mean, some people don't ever touch the earth,
Hmm.
Um, but this is, I think, one of our biggest like opportunities actually right now. And I think we'll see like as we get more disconnected and more technological,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and people get sicker, I think that like this wisdom is going to be coming more and more into the forefront of
Yep.
like the public,
Yeah.
because we are cyclical, beings of
Hmm.
the earth, and our capacity to sync with the cycles
Hmm.
of life
Hmm.
determines our well-being,
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
sleeping when it's dark rather than having that blue light technology like in our eyes up all night, and then
Yep.
sleeping all day or whatever. Yeah. And honoring our feminine cycles, our
Hmm.
menstruation cycles
Hmm.
too, like our
Hmm.
capacity to really sync up with the natural cycles of nature, of life, is going to be, I think, one of the things that saves us
Hmm.
actually,
Hmm. And
so.
I know a lot of people struggled with, during COVID times. And I understand that. And there was that first couple of weeks, right? When I think we were all on board with this break, you
Totally.
know, and a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people did get outside,
It was spring, people
right.
were doing gardens.
Right. So, yes, I get it. If you were in New York City, you may not have been able to
Mm.
spend a lot of time outside. But in general, it's like the work went down, us getting outside went up, the animals started coming out, right? Because we weren't driving around and just
Mm.
bustling around. And so, like, nature was like really waking up in this, different way. And it was, if we could just look at those 2 weeks, we could see how beautiful actually that time was for all of us, minus obviously if you had to be an essential worker and things like that. And I totally respect and understand that it was not
Mm.
good for everyone. But for,
Yeah.
those of us that were lucky enough, it's like, oh, if we could do that, like on a consistent basis, I mean, I think that really showed those of us that were paying attention. Oh yeah, like this is more of how we're supposed to live, right? We're supposed to have breaks.
Yes.
I mean, in Europe, there's still so many places they get 7 weeks off paid
Mm.
vacation a year. I mean, it's, and they have to take it. Like the office shuts down, like these kinds of things, and unfortunately in America, there's no stopping
Yeah.
ever, you know.
But we can like even 15 minutes, like even
Mhm.
with working with what we have, like even if
Mhm.
we took our shoes off and had like ate our lunch on our lunch breaks
Yep.
in the sun,
Yep.
touching down barefoot to the earth, like
Mhm.
at a park or even just a little small patch. It doesn't have to be like,
Yeah,
epic
a big old
nature
park.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even for 15 minutes, if we just like quieted our mind,
Mhm.
slowed down, chewed our food slowly,
Mhm.
listened to the sounds, around us,
Mhm.
like it does, we don't have to do it all day for it to
Right.
have a huge benefit either. So
Yep.
working with
Absolutely.
what we have.
Yep. Yep. 100%. I think that's such an
Yeah.
important thing
Mm.
because I know, I've seen this over the years with clients. They can really get caught up in that. I just don't have time,
Yeah.
and this is where I think working with someone like you or me or, what have you, it's like, let's help you find some time, right? Like for
Mm.
one of my clients, she had a really stressful job and then she had to pick up her son, at 3 o'clock from school. And I was like, can you leave 5 minutes early? And she said, yeah. And she said she always, is in the car waiting for him for 5 to 10 minutes when she gets to school. So I was like, if you leave 5 minutes early and you have 5 or 10 minutes while you're waiting for him, sitting in your car, even, windows rolled down with some meditation music on and just close
Instead
your
of
eyes.
scrolling.
Right. Right. And it's like, it's finding those moments. Cause yeah, like you said,
Mm.
we have plenty of time to scroll usually.
Yeah,
We find that
usually.
time. Yeah.
And
So
we
yeah.
think it's relaxing,
Right.
but
Right.
like,
It's
yeah.
yeah, it's not absolutely. So
Hmm.
can you share with everyone what your classes are like?
Yeah. So when you get to my class, there's a real sisterly warmth, you know. I always hug everybody, but
Mhm.
if it's in person,
Yeah.
if people want to hug, I ask. But um, but you always feel a warm welcome and just being received as you are. There's a real come as you are energy to it, and we always start with tuning in. So it's like, how am I feeling? Which,
Mhm.
like I said, is because of the disassociation from past traumas, is a skill that we are really like learning,
Mhm.
remembering. So we always tune in with how we're feeling,
Mhm.
body scan,
Mhm.
meeting ourselves with compassion, knowing that however I'm showing up today, I'm worthy of love.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then we start to move really slow. So we start with intuitive pleasure-based movements so that we can really kind of sync our mind with our body and start to kind of like code ourselves that like moving should feel good. Like this, it feels good to be here. Like it feels good to honor my body.
Mhm.
And we may not always feel good in our body, but we're meeting ourselves with compassion
Mhm.
and we're inviting in as much tenderness and pleasure as we can. So we
Mhm.
always start to move really slow, really like syncing ourselves back up so that when we start moving faster, we're not like disassociated and like just moving so fast that we get hurt, right? So there's
Mhm.
always like a slow moving to really sync mind with body.
Mhm.
And then we move into some like usually compound functional strength training movements. So, usually like full body strength training moves. And then we dance freely. I really sometimes, give a little smidge of a choreography, low pressure choreography, something that everyone can kind of get behind. And for like 1 minute, we can all feel like Beyonce. Um, but nothing too high pressure. Most of the time, it's a free dance because our strength training is very linear. And so I like to balance that out with something that's totally like free form and we get to
Mhm.
like shake and just and growl sometimes, make noises sometimes, and just kind of like let ourselves freely express. And
Mhm.
again, feel good in our body,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
maybe get a little twerk in there. It's like you never really
Whatever makes you
know
feel good.
whatever, you never really know what's gonna happen. And then we come down to the mat. It's a more like a Pilates style core work. And then we end with stretching, yoga,
Mhm.
meditation, EFT, tapping,
Nice.
breath work sometimes at the beginning.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll really weave all of those into one class. And some people are like, wow, like what just happened? Like, how do we do all those things like all in like 75 minutes? That was crazy, but totally happened. Yeah, and really like my goal is like nothing short of like a total rebirth, Like I remember
Mhm.
going to like my first yoga class like after I was like a new mom
Mhm.
and I was just like, oh, I need this so bad. Like
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
went to the class and it was like it took everything to get there. And
Mm.
I left just being so like, like
Oh.
unenthused or
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
unshifted or whatever. And I was like, man, like if people are gonna make their way to class, like I want to make it like
Worth
worthwhile,
it.
like meeting ourselves like in whatever like pain, fear is showing up, and
Mhm.
then like birthing ourselves like into like radical self-trust,
Mhm.
by the end
Mhm.
of class. And so it's really cool because I get to see, a lot of times we cry, have like a little release,
Mhm.
and I see, all of our faces just like the light shining through, at the end of class. So yeah, that is really, really my goal.
Yeah. I
Rebirth.
love, yeah, I mean, and the transformative nature of it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to access. I believe everyone should be able to do therapy. I hope that,
Hmm.
most of us are able to do it, but there is something about classes sometimes, right? Where you can't just call up your therapist necessarily when you're in like the middle of something or you've just had a hard day or what have you, right? It's like you have that time on Wednesday that you're going to talk to them. But like
Yeah.
when you have this class that you get to go to maybe at the end of your day or the beginning of your day or what have you, and you really, you know, it is somatic in nature because you're moving stuff through you
Oh yeah.
in the process, and
Oh yeah.
that's why I think a lot of times people don't realize why they feel good when they leave a class like that, right? And it's like you moved the energy, like
Hmm.
that is what it is, and I love that you have the option to do those online classes
Yeah. On
again
demand,
on
like
demand.
anytime you need it, like
Right, exactly, because it's like if they don't live here and they can't attend your
yeah.
class live or, whatever is going on in somebody's week and they can't come to a live class, like having that access to be able to do that at home.
Yeah, and I think like you said, like our therapy is once a week, and like we have to be able to like hold this kind of space for ourselves. Like
Mhm.
in the moment when like our fear, our shame bubbles
Mhm.
up to the surface, it's like that's when we need it. And I created these on-demand practices, and some of them are just like, tending to the trigger, like breath work, EFT, movement, shaking,
Mhm.
not as much working out, but
Mhm.
just like tending to the emotional. And so I wanted that for the people because that's how like that's what I needed,
Mhm.
when my nervous system was totally out of whack. And I
Mhm.
still like when I'm struggling, I need to have help holding space for myself sometimes,
Yeah. Yep.
hit the
You're
button
like you're like, "Thank
and
God
just
I created
be
this
guided.
so I can, like,
Yeah.
tune in." Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And when I really need it, that's what I do. And it's so, so helpful. But ultimately, like everything that I offer is helping, learn these skills, these
Mhm.
tools of showing up for and honoring what we're feeling
Mhm.
and moving this stuff through our body so that we can really show up for ourselves like in the moment when we need to. And I have to
Mhm.
say, like, the most powerful releases that I've ever had didn't happen in a therapy session. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
no, they happened like when in the moment where the stuff was bubbling up for me, and
Yeah.
because I had tools, because I kind of trusted myself, that I could go in and just really feel what was showing up and like release it.
Yeah. And that's opportunity right there, right? It
Yeah.
feels like the antithesis of opportunity sometimes when you're in it, right? But that stuff bubbling up, like you said, being able to meet that
Yeah.
is the ability to transform it and, to,
Yes.
yeah, be in full acceptance of all the parts of yourself versus,
Mhm.
I mean, it's natural. Most of us want to run away when that stuff comes up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we want to be past it. Something bubbled up for me the other day, and it was like, oh, not this
Yeah.
again.
You're like, aren't I done
Like,
with this?
I'm like, this was last year. And, it was, I mean, I preached this stuff, and like a whole week went by of just like,
Hmm.
trying to avoid it. And I
Hmm.
had so much anxiety. I saw all of my squirrely, addictive coping mechanism coming to rise to the
Mhm.
surface. And finally, I'm just like, oh man, like I can't, like there was a pain in my solar plexus that just like was not quitting. And so I
Mhm.
took myself out onto the earth and just let myself cry and feel
Mhm.
and tap and
Mhm.
shake and be supported by the elements.
Mhm.
And I felt so much better
Mhm.
afterwards.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I could have like saved that for therapy or whatever, but it's like, no, like we need to be able to hold the space ultimately also for
Yeah. Yeah.
ourselves. And our
And
daily practice like sets us up to do that, I think.
yeah. And what a beautiful thing for your daughter, right? And for anyone listening, for daughters, sons, trans, what have you, any of your kids to be able to show them how to process their emotions at a young age rather than how we've been taught, which was all to push it down generally, and then suddenly we're adults with walking around with all this trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a spiraling,
Mhm.
journey. It's
Mhm.
like we kind of think, oh, well, we addressed that one thing and now, it's done. But,
Mhm.
you just never know and another layer is gonna bubble up. So
Mhm.
that continued willingness to meet ourselves and
Mhm.
what shows up is so important. It's a
Mhm.
lifestyle,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're like, "This is the brand new lifestyle thing that we're doing, people, all right?"
I
I love it, I love it.
know.
Well, so let people know how they can, get access to this on-demand
Yes.
system.
Yes, so I have a bunch of on-demand meditations and workouts that you can access totally free for 30 days. And
Nice,
then it's sliding scale after that as part of my commitment to uplift the feminine.
nice.
So you can access that at empowerbodymindsoul.com. You can
Mhm.
also find me on Instagram. Same thing, Empower Body Mind Soul. I would love to connect with you, DM me. Let's hang out.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom today. I think there were so
Mm.
many good nuggets in today's talk of, you know, again, it's like it's not that complicated, right? I think we try and make this stuff so complicated and we feel like there's this answer that we can't get to when
Mm.
really it's just coming back to being with ourselves and allowance and using our tools, I mean, again and again and again, and so but I think a lot of what you said today will really resonate and click in people's minds. So thank you for sharing.
Of course. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah. So fun to connect.
Yes. All right, you guys. I will see you next week.
Okay.